Haul the roll and go. Where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today we are in Kansas City. We are at a complex called the American Royal Complex. It is like a big coliseum is about the only way I could describe it. We showed up here the other day to just take a look around. It's got a lot of horse-related stuff, which is Linda's main attraction. So we showed up here to take a look at some horse stuff. They have a museum that's in transition. So a lot of the things that we talk about today will probably be moving and changing around a little bit. We are with Nathan. Nathan is going to tell us all about this place, about what all happens here, and I'm sure we'll get into some Kansas City history as well. So welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, good. I like it when people are excited to be here. Okay, so when we first walk into this complex, you must have concerts here or horse shows or a lot of different things. What's the American Royal Complex?
Yeah, so the American Royal Association is an organization that's been around since 1899. We started as the National Hereford Show. What made that Hereford Show so significant in 1899 is it was the first purebred sale and also show that occurred at the same time. Since that time, we've been in quite a few different buildings. The building we're standing in today was built in 1992, and this building gets used for a lot of different stuff. When it comes to American Royal activities, we're talking horse shows, livestock shows. We've got a PRCA sanctioned rodeo, and then also a couple different barbecue activities, and I can talk more about all of those. But then this building also gets used for a variety of other things. Like when you came here this weekend, there was an alpaca show going on.
Yes, there was.
We've had a circus go on in here. We've had concerts happen in here. The United States' largest indoor farm show, the Western Farm Show, happens here in February. So the building is used for a lot of different activities, including the activities that the American Royal puts on.
And what exactly is the American Royal?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a weird name that doesn't give you any idea of what it is.
Right? Yep. So the American Royal Association, like I said, 1899 is when we started. We didn't actually get our name until a few years into this cattle show kind of experience. So you're standing in the home of the West Bottoms and the stockyards. The stockyards were the economic engine for Kansas City up until the 1950s. Really, that's when we talk about the height of the stockyards. But the original Union Station was down here. A lot of banks in Kansas City got their start down in this area. And so there was this large stockyards complex where the sale of cattle was happening to a lot of meat packers in and around the Kansas City area, either right across the river in Kansas or even here on the Missouri side. And so we had, on occasion, purebred cattle shows that were going on here. Breeders coming to say, hey, we have the best genetics. We want to compete against one another to prove that. And so that show, the Herefords were the first one, which is a red and white cattle breed.
Right.
They were the first one to say, hey, let's try and do a sale with this. And very quickly after that, Angus, Galloways, and Shorthorns jumped on. And so we got to this point in 1902 where we were having thousands of people come to this live cattle show that had a sale after it and having a really large experience. We had an individual by the name of Dean Curtis, who was actually the dean of the College of Agriculture at Iowa State University. Recently, having traveled to England, come back to the United States, he had attended the British Royal Exposition there. Had come to the United States, seen our livestock show and said, this is just as high a quality of what's been going on for decades over in England. We should call this the American Royal. And so ever since then, that's how we got our name. He wrote to Drover's Telegram, and then we ended up becoming the American Royal Association. Very quickly after that, in 1905 is when we started our first horse shows. We had an individual by the name of Tom Bass. Tom Bass was born a slave, died a free man, was a renowned horse trainer in the Kansas City area at the time. Tom actually decided to start this horse show as an opportunity to raise funds for the Kansas City Fire Department. And then very quickly after that, we added rodeos, we added a barbecue, and I can go more into the history of those things as well. But when we talk about the American Royal, really we are, lack of better terms, we are an organization that exists to champion food and agriculture. We do so through competitive events.
Okay.
And those competitive events mostly lie in the realm of food, agriculture, livestock, horses, rodeo, and barbecue. And then my job as actually director of education is to find ways to weave an educational component for either adult consumers or youth throughout all of it.
Okay. So you have big barbecue competitions here also.
We do.
That's not why Kansas City is known for barbecue, right?
No, but it helps. We are actually home to the World Series of Barbecue. So what started as just a fundraiser for the American Royal in 1980 has actually grown to become the world's largest barbecue competition. So this past year, you could have found us at the Kansas Speedway at the end of September, beginning of October. We had over 505 teams from 14 different countries competing.
Really?
Yep. So it's a Kansas City Barbecue Society sanctioned contest. The Kansas City Barbecue Society actually is the world's largest barbecue sanctioning body. So it sanctions contests worldwide, and it's a logo that is internationally recognized in the barbecue and food world community.
Okay, and how do I get to be a judge for this?
Absolutely. So legitimately, there is actually certified judging courses. So I'm actually a certified judge. I have a member number and all that. And so if you go on Kansas City Barbecue Society's website, they are hosting courses monthly throughout the world. So,
really?
Yep. So they do a bunch of them in the winter, and they have 2 of their reps travel around to different countries throughout Europe and actually host classes to folks who are interested in the sport of barbecue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel after tasting or eating 105 barbecue meals?
Yeah. So
I mean, that's like half a year's worth of food.
So what they do, luckily, is they find a really good way of recruiting enough barbecue judges, which is why they host the courses and all of that. So there's 6 per table, and there are 4 meats that you eat as a part of a Kansas City Barbecue Society competition. So chicken, and that can be any part of the chicken. So some people will serve bone-in thighs, some people will serve chicken breasts, some people will serve drums. All of those are open. So you just have to include 6 pieces. So that way every member of the table has an opportunity to eat. So chicken, ribs, which are baby back ribs, pork, and that can be tenderloin, it can be pulled pork, it can be whatever you want to serve, and then brisket is the last course. And so those are the 4. And so you are, most of the time as a barbecue judge, taking a bite of each, but you get to have 6 chicken, 6 ribs, 6 pork, 6 brisket.
Wow.
And so a lot of barbecue judges, if you got really good at it, you've got a cooler set next to your side. If you really like something, you've taken a bite of it, and then you pop it into your cooler so you can take home later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So you learn a little bit as you do a few of them.
I see how that goes.
Yep.
Okay, now when we were talking on the phone about this, you said that you didn't really know if you wanted me to come do this museum because you guys are in transition. Go ahead and explain a little bit of your transition and what's happening and how this is going to play out over the next year or two, and give people an idea of what they can expect when they come back, or if there's even a possibility of seeing this before the transition takes place.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we, as an organization, 1899 till today, have been here in the West Bottoms, and we have 124 years of history that we absolutely love and are really happy to have really carried the stockyards in the West Bottoms through, to be honest, what has been pretty challenging times down in this area. One of the things that we saw back in 2017 is our facility was aging and kind of needed of repair. So this facility is actually owned by the city of Kansas City, Missouri. We're in a partnership with them where we lease space, and we have the opportunity to use the building how we want for a certain amount of days, and then other days if we want to grow. We are not in control of our destiny in that way, and we have to pay the city to continue to use the facility if we grow our series of events. And so as an organization, in 2017, we kind of said, hey, we'd be interested in expanding this space, but if you start to drive around, you start to recognize there's not a whole lot of space to go. We're pretty landlocked. We have got a river on one side of us. This area is pretty darn tight, and so we don't have a whole lot of spaces for us to go. So when we think about all of our events that we do, some of our landmark events, our World Series barbecue, it's already not hosted here. It's hosted at the Kansas Speedway because it's outgrown this facility. Our livestock show, which happens every year in October, has actually had to move from a 2-week to a 3-week show because we've outgrown the space and we don't have enough, we don't have the ability to host all of the animals, all the head that come through here. This past year, we had a little over 3,500 head of cattle, hogs, lambs, and goats, and exhibitors from 37 different states come here to show the best livestock in the country. And so we don't have space. It being 3 weeks long is a really big challenge to a lot of those livestock exhibitors. If they want to be here and show cattle in week 1 because they've got a certain breed, well, hey, the other breed isn't showing until week 3, and so they're coming from Idaho. They have to make a decision on which one they're going to do. So that's a big challenge for us. We have a horse show, the national championship for saddlebreds, that we are on a waiting list for stall space. And so all of these shows for us have continued to grow. We sell out our rodeo every year for our arena, and we need more space. And we don't have, the city has said that they're not at this time going to say, we're investing a lot of money into this facility to help you grow. And so we are going to go out on our own and move to the state of Kansas. Big change for everybody, big change for us, big change for the city of Kansas City. So we're going out to what is called the Legends area across from the Kansas Speedway. And we're going to be building a new facility out there. As a part of that, we're going to take as much of the stockyards history, as much of our history since 1899 and the historical artifacts that you're seeing in here today with us. It's going to be different, though. So it's going to be rotating exhibits. We're not going to have kind of a standstill museum as kind of it exists today, but rather a bunch of small cases that really have a chance to put our history on display. But also, as we're building something new, we're hopefully going to do some experiences with VR. We're hopefully going to be able to tell the story of food and agriculture and why Kansas City is so important to that story as we go through this transition to a new space where we're going to be able to tell that story probably even better than we can tell it today.
Wow. And as we walk into this museum, well, this facility, we came to a alpaca show.
Yeah. They would get angry with you.
Yes. You don't want to mess up alpacas and llamas. Both of them were created by Dr. Seuss, I'm sure, but that's neither here nor there. We came here, the show area was huge, but it was just a small little part of this facility. And it's hard to believe that you could outgrow. But you also said that just in changing exhibits, changing from events and stuff, we were at the alpaca show on Friday, and you said it's already now all set up as a horse arena for a horse show, and you said that there are people that work full-time just moving dirt, stock panels, and that kind of stuff for these different shows. That's just unbelievable that it's that busy with the agriculture, livestock,
event
venue.
Space.
Yes. Event space. Yeah. I like that because you would think those guys are so busy raising their animals and stuff that they don't have time for 3 weeks, like you said, to come here and not take care of the livestock at home. Yeah. I mean, they're taking care of it. They've got workers, but still, you need to have the overseer kind of making sure that things are going right.
Yeah. No, it is. So I grew up showing livestock. I grew up showing horses. And oddly enough, my dad did competition barbecue and all of my cousins, except for myself and my siblings, rodeo. So I have this really weird lens that I had a chance to see kind of into all of those worlds before coming here to the American Royal. And I never competed at the level that the American Royal expects. My family and I knew that, like, for us to compete here, that we would have to up our game exponentially. And so we actually have, when we talk about like the event venue and us really being, hopefully, as we move to Kansas, the epicenter for agriculture and food events in the United States. That's who we want to be. We want to be that go-to spot that everybody knows, hey, they have the best facilities. They're going to be the ones that we really want to take the time. Because to be honest, the unique thing about that is there is a lot more I think, in the food and agriculture competitive community than people realize. And our audiences are really kind of interesting. So our livestock community knows us for our livestock show really well. I think most of them know we do a barbecue. Most of them know we do horse shows. Most of them know we have a rodeo. They don't understand maybe the level at which we do those things. Our barbecue community may or may not know we do a livestock show, but they know us really well for our barbecue community. And so what's really unique, I think, about our organization is, and what we're going to be as we grow, is every week we're going to have more space to do some of those events at the same time. So when we move to a new space, we'll actually have 3 different arenas, 2 that are indoor, 1 outdoor. My hope and my dream is that we've got a rodeo going on right next door to a livestock show, right next door to an outdoor cutting horse show. And hopefully we have so the barn we're building, 395,000 square feet. It's 6.9 football fields long, to give you some perspective.
Wow.
We'll be able to host different shows going on at the same time. And today we can't do that. Today we're pretty limited of we've got one thing in, one thing out. And that's why our dirt team has to be so gosh darn good at what they do of getting things in and out and get things in and out quickly.
Well, so this is really going to be interactive. You can have a lamb show, a cow show, a pig show, and the barbecue as they come on out, having just been bought in the back for a barbecue.
Yeah, you joked, but so there's an artifact over here. It's really unique. So the Savoy, which is a really prestigious restaurant here in Kansas City, been around for a really long time. It's changed hands of ownership a few different times, but they used to do an American Royal dinner. That American Royal dinner used to have the champions actually. So our livestock auction is at the end of market week is a terminal auction. So those animals are destined to be harvested. And so so here's the other strange thing about every part of our competition world. There's all sorts of cheats, tricks, rules that can get broken. Just as humans have performance enhancing,
right?
So do animals. And so we have to keep track of those carcasses as they go through. We don't do it today, but what used to happen in fairly recent history is those animals would actually be harvested, and then a couple months later, we'd actually have a champions dinner. And
really?
So there would be a really fun experience where we were actually able to take those animals. We still have a lot of folks who buy those animals today, and they want the hides for themselves. Because to give you some context, our livestock auction, our young folks, it's really an opportunity for the Kansas City business community to support young folks here who compete here at the American Royal. Last year, our champion steer sold for $250,000.
For how much?
$250,000. For
a steer?
Yep.
That's not even a reproductive animal.
Yeah, that's destined to be harvested. And so it's sometimes a point of pride for people in the Kansas City community to say, I bought the champion American Royal steer, I bought the champion American Royal lamb that year. We have one individual in our history, his name's Eddie Williams. He used to be a member of our board of directors way back when. And 1946 was our highest ever steer. And so sold steer. At the time in 1946, and I want to make sure I get these numbers right, because it's a fascinating kind of, to be honest, a pissing match between him and some of the other local meat packers.
Right.
So his name's Eddie Williams. Eddie owned one of the local meat packing plants, and he bought the steer that year that was champion, was named T.O. Pride. So we've got a photo of him. He was a Hereford steer. So T.O. Pride sold for $44,375 in 1946. Adjusted for inflation, and I ran these numbers back in January, $698,807.
No.
And so,
and what for a meal?
And
I mean, well, it's not a meal. It's a meal for a year, but still.
And if we're being honest, most of these folks, it's not so much about that. It's the opportunity for naming recognition. Eddie actually, very few of the people who buy the champion animals, most of the time they donate it to a local charity. They don't typically keep the meat for themselves. And so Eddie actually took the hide of T.O. Pride, turned it into 3 different boots. One he kept for himself, one he gave to us here at the American Royal, and the other he gave to Senator Harry Darby. And Senator Harry Darby is a really important figure for Kansas City. Was the only person to ever been president of the Chambers of Commerce on both sides of the state. both sides of the state line. Has a part of I-70 named after him. He's a really important figure here in Kansas City and used to be chairman of our board.
Wow. That's almost $750,000 for a steer.
Yeah.
For a breeding animal, I can comprehend this, but for something to put on a plate and pride, I guess pride's a powerful tool.
It is. Well, and so the livestock industry, I think, is a lot more intricate, competitive, and interesting, I think, than a lot of people take it to be. I think the idea around how do we push America's livestock forward to have the best carcass, to have the best product at the end result, but also like the competitiveness around how are these mama cows doing in the field? How are they doing on the ranch? And all of these breeds are really trying to champion their breed to do that, and they do that by competing at livestock shows like ours across the United States.
Wow. Now, can I go down a really bad path?
That's fine. Let's go.
Okay. We are coming into a rather tough agricultural time.
Sure.
As far as the way that I perceive it, and maybe my perception's all wrong, but we've got an issue with cow farts. We've got an issue with people jumping on a bandwagon saying that animals have rights and we don't need them on our plates. We've got Bill Gates pushing very hard and getting FDA approval just right shortly, or else he already has, for artificial meat or lab-grown meat where there are not animals on the land, are not ranchers, are not farmers. We've got crickets that are coming in as our mainstay push down our throat food issues. I see all of these as major issues for the agricultural industry, especially as people jump on that bandwagon because they're being pushed that way through the media, through movies, through education in the colleges and in the grade schools. I see a real issue for the agriculture business in the future, and you guys are stalking that is not going to overpower you because you're building a whole new maybe billion-dollar facility to keep this going forward. Tell me what you feel is progression or the future of the agriculture.
Yeah, so it's a multi-million-dollar facility that we believe has a chance to celebrate food and agriculture in the fact of, I think for myself and for many of us who are in the space, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not us or them. I would say many of us are looking to say we've been issued a challenge by the American public that we're not doing good enough and we need to prove that we can. And so for many of these cattle breeders, many of them haven't thought a whole lot up until this point about, okay, so what are the feed additives that we can make sure we still have a really good product for the American consumer down the line, but we also reduce our emissions? How do we tell the story better? Because of the cattle in the Flint Hills in Kansas are probably a great example. The Flint Hills can't be used for anything besides grazing. It's really, really challenging to actually put a plow in the ground and do anything with it. Cattle are phenomenal upcyclers. They're taking a lot of waste that we use today. Boulevard Brewing will tell you they have a really cool sustainability tour that they do, and it's specifically geared around their sustainability, where they'll talk to you about the dried distillers grains that come off all of their brewing products go directly to feedlots, so that way they can reduce their waste. Cattle are excellent upcyclers, and not just cattle, livestock in general.
Right,
excellent
right.
Upcyclers, right? So when we talk about the challenge from the American consumer, what I hear is our industry hasn't done a good enough job of telling the story of how efficient, how sustainable livestock production really is. Now, if you drive up to a feedlot today, that doesn't look very sustainable. I'm gonna give everybody that. But when we talk about the process to get to that feedlot, and right now today, a feedlot is, for us in the industry, probably the most efficient way to raise cattle quickly, to get it to the American consumer quickly, and to do so in a way that's gonna provide a really high quality protein source. So I think the other piece that is really interesting when we think about American consumer perception and the world's consumer perception of animal protein, when you jump an economic resource level, protein is the first thing you add to your diet. So you go from rice and beans, you start to add chicken. You start to add pork to your diet. China is an excellent example of that from the 1980s to today. The amount of pork that they consume as a country has exploded exponentially. That's because so many of their population has reached to the middle class. They're not reaching for protein that is plant-based. They're reaching for protein that is meat-based. Now, I think we in America have this really, in Europe, have a really fun luxury and privilege of having been a really high-performing quality economy with a lot of folks in the middle class or above for a really long time. And so we get to have a privileged place of position of plant protein versus animal protein and have the choice to choose. I think the Beyond products, the Impossible products have done a really good job of showing us that there's a population of America that is going to probably consume that product. But over time, we're going to see people revert back to animal protein. Those products have a place. They're, I think, rightly so, they should have a place. But the American consumer, I think, as you start to read into the ingredient label, as you start to really process what's in that, you have to start to make some decisions for yourself of like, okay, so I know what a pork chop is. A Beyond Meat patty, there's a lot in that I maybe don't know as much about. And I was a food science major in undergrad. I think the modern marvels of what we're able to create there is fascinating. And I think that there's a space for that to be, but I also think that the American consumer most of the time will revert back to animal protein as time goes on.
Well, I think that the experiments also in the past where you have oleo, which turned into margarine and surpassed butter for several years. People, I think, are eating butter now in the margarine industry when they discovered that it was one molecule off from plastic, decided maybe they didn't want that in their body. I think you also have the same thing with cheese. They have the processed cheese and some of that kind of stuff. Everybody wants it on their nachos, but when you go to get a cheese sandwich, you want to slice a piece of cheese.
The American dairy industry has got a really fun story to tell. Fluid milk consumption has gone down, and everybody's aware of that. Still the largest purchaser of U.S. fluid milk in the United States today, or one of the largest purchasers, is still Starbucks, which is fascinating, right? And I think the other thing that has been really an interesting tell that American dairy's done a really phenomenal job of has been telling the story of dairy of how can it be utilized in other products. Cheese, yogurt, all of those are products, further processed products that Americans have really continued to increase our consumption of. And so the dairy industry would look at probably their fluid milk consumption. If that's the only part they're looking at and say, man, we're in trouble. You look at the whole picture and then all of a sudden it starts to look like a pretty darn bright future. And so when I think about our new facility and I think about where we're headed, I think we look at it as a two-part opportunity. So one, how do we take the people who are already doing this and give them the platform to continue to do it at a higher level, at a better level. But by us staking our claim out there in Kansas City and a new facility that's attractive for the general public to come and see, all of a sudden we get to help paint that story even brighter and have those consumers actually have that interaction. So one of my favorite events that I put on for here at the American Royal is what we call field trips. So come this May, I actually, over 2 days, will welcome 1,200 one day, 1,000 the next, second and third graders to our facility, where I have stations set up where they will have a 15-minute presentation about food and agriculture from a variety of different folks, and then they'll go in and watch a youth rodeo. I do the same thing during the livestock show where I actually get to walk kids around the barns and have them actually talk to producers and have the producers actually tell the story. That age group is 4th and 5th grade about how they raise cattle. Why do they raise cattle? What are some of the benefits of eating beef? What are all the products that come out of cattle besides just the meat source, you know, the hide, the leather, all that? It's a ton of fun. And we have the opportunity at the American Royal to do that even on a bigger scale when we go to a new facility.
Okay. So when you get your new facility, are you going to add to your barbecue competition barbecued cricket?
Well, so you laugh. So it's interesting. We do some really cool competitions there that are like, so Turkey has jumped on and said, why are we getting left behind? So National Turkey Federation has said, we want to start a series of turkey competitions throughout. And so you're going to see, I don't know if we'll ever get to cricket, but there's a lot of folks who have raised their hand to say, oh, wait, we want to prove that our protein source is actually viable as like something that's really beautiful and can be really well done.
Cool.
Yep.
This is awesome.
Good.
Because agriculture's been going on for a long time, and I look at agricultural people as stewards of the earth for the most part. They don't want their pastures ate down to the point where they can't continue their lifestyle of raising animals, and so they don't destroy the earth. They try to figure out how to keep it coming back.
Yep.
And when you have agricultural practices that if we went to a totally vegetarian type style, that has just as much tendency to hurt long-term use of the earth as what any other style of use does.
Yeah, well, and I talked about that. Like, there's some really cool things that livestock has been doing for generations, right? As it comes to upcycling waste that comes off of it comes off of growing crops, growing vegetables. You know, there's a lot of things that we don't and aren't able to use or don't want to eat as a part of an American consumer that cattle really love, or that sheep and goats really love. And that to me is always really exciting, and we, I think as an industry, probably need to do a much better job of telling that story of how animal protein is an excellent upcycler of that.
Well, even the manure and everything else is an awesome fertilizer.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, to where you don't have to use the chemical fertilizers.
Yep.
And I think it's sustainable. It's just a matter of being able to, like you said, present it in a sustainable way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So let's take a look at some of your different displays.
Yeah, for sure. Let's actually talk about what's in the museum, right?
Yes.
So one of the things that I can say with certainty will make it over to our new facility is going to be any representation we have of the Hereford breed, and specifically Dale the bull. So Dale I got a big old photo right here. So Dale was the champion bull in 1899. You talk about the representation, the best representation of the Hereford breed, and at that time, Hereford was king. So Angus cattle really didn't become all that popular until certified Angus beef came around, and they got into restaurants and did a really good job of telling that story with chefs. Talk about one of the most brilliant marketing plans that has ever been laid out. Hereford used to be king. And here at the American Royal, Hereford's still king. If we serve beef here, it's going to be certified Hereford beef. But Dale himself, if you ever see a photo of a Hereford bull throughout Kansas City, most of the time it's going to be modeled after Dale. If you drive up, you leave here the West Bottoms, and you drive into downtown using the 12th Street Bridge, you're going to see a Hereford bull actually up on a pillar.
Right.
Yep. So that's Bob, bull on building. Bob is modeled after Dale. And so so Dale and our representation of the Hereford breed is going to be still something we utilize. If you fly out of the new airport today, we actually have a barbecue restaurant. It's the World Series Barbecue Champions restaurant. And so that barbecue restaurant has its own cook-off here in Kansas City. That it's actually going to rotate chefs, all that sort of good stuff. But our imagery, our photos are actually in there. And we very intentionally picked the Hereford to be the cattle that was represented in there. So that is our livestock case. You got all sorts of fun stuff in there. We've got ribbons from way back to the very beginning. You've got tickets from way back to the very beginning. One thing that you're going to see a lot of that we're going to continue to keep doing as well is our pins or badges. So lapel pin is probably the best way to describe it for an audio audience. But way back when, what we found, so this is before Facebook, all that sort of good stuff, we were having these large crowds show up for our livestock show in the early 1900s. Well, we had invited all these people to be judges or ringside officials, and we didn't know who was who. And we had people kind of being an imposter, saying, hey, I'm the judge, and getting into the ring. And so what they resorted to is mailing out in advance a badge that certified you are the person that will be the judge for this event. And really kind of a clever way to do that. We've kept that tradition today. While there's nobody raising their hand as an imposter to be a judge in the ring, we still to this day, if you are an exhibitor with us at the American Royal, if you're a part of a judging contest, if you're a volunteer, if you're a member of our board of directors, if you are a staff person, all that, everybody gets their own lapel pin.
Wow. And these kind of have the crown on them with the blue ribbon.
Yep. And so the crown is the iconic imagery for us, right? But we have pins. Our earliest pin we have here is from 1904. It's a press pin.
Wow.
Looks more like a button.
Right.
But 1906, we've got one. All of these shield ones are from like the 1930s, 1940s. Our chairman of the board today is who actually designs that pin every year. Our chairman right now is the CEO of J.E. Dunn Construction, Gordon Blansford. Gordon actually really loved the shield concept and actually decided to bring that back. And so for the past 2 years as he's been chairman, we've actually had a shield as the design of our current badges. And so, so the badges are going to continue to this day. We actually have a lot of folks who collect them. If you see, we'll have a lot of hats that people have donated back to us, or pin collections that they'll have donated back to us over the years, where, to be honest, they probably have a better collection of it than we do. And we try and do our best to capture them and hold back some every year, but I wasn't around, or my predecessor wasn't around in the 40s and 50s to be able to hold those back for us. So our rodeo case, our rodeo's got an interesting story. So rodeo's been a sport and been going on for forever. The American Royal didn't really embrace the sport of rodeo until 1949. So we had all of these horse shows, all these livestock shows going on for about 50 years by the time we decided to roll out a rodeo. And the rodeo itself actually was started because we had this building here, not the one you're standing in today, but a different one, that sat empty for all of the spring. And it really was only like September onward that horse shows and livestock shows really started going in it. And so the team at the time said, well, let's do something in it, you know? And so the very first rodeo we had also had a dairy show, dairy cattle show attached to it. 1949 is when it happened. Very quickly after that, so 1951 was the last year we did it up until 1965. And why we had that 10-year gap, if you're familiar with Kansas City's history, 1951 is a pretty significant year in Kansas City.
Not familiar, so you're going to have to tell me.
Absolutely. So that is when the flood of 1951 happened here.
Oh, okay.
This entire area had a flood go through it that you drove by the livestock exchange buildings, you came in, multiple floors were covered.
Really?
The stockyards that were down here were devastated, cattle just floating down the river. The 1951 is when we talk about the start of the decline of the stockyards. Because after that, the stockyards never rebuilt. A lot of the meatpacking plants never rebuilt. Because what had happened by then was refrigerated trucking and refrigerated rail had become possible. And so with refrigerated trucking and refrigerated rail, a meatpacking plant didn't need to be next to an urban center anymore. The livestock exchange didn't need to happen in an urban center anymore. And so it could go out west and didn't have to be here. And so a lot of those meatpacking plants said, that sounds good with us. We'll move to where we know we've got a population that's willing to work, that we've got maybe not all the sanitation issues or the regulation that an urban center might have. And so 1951 is when it happened. That also paused our rodeo until 1965. The rodeo came back in 1965 and then became a part of our fall schedule of events. So for a good portion of the American Royals history, and for what most of Kansas City probably knows us for, we became this really large, there's something going on here every night, September to Thanksgiving kind of experience.
Right.
And so almost the state fair experience, right, where there's constantly something going on. That's how most people probably know us. Our goal when we move to a new facility, and something that we're already doing today, is we want to be known for our year-round calendar of events, that there is something going on here 52 weeks of year. One of the things that a lot of people in Kansas City, that you'll see some imagery behind you today, is this parade.
Right.
So the parade, just as New York has Macy's, as Chicago has St. Patrick's, we had the American Royal Parade here in Kansas City. This is a tradition that ended in 2015. Turns out pretty darn expensive to shut down streets in Kansas City. And Kansas City's been lucky. We've not been without parades. We've had a couple sports teams that have done pretty darn phenomenal, that we got to have our parades. But our hope is for the 120th anniversary, we'll do something to kind of honor, and we'll probably do it on an every few years basis. It won't be something we do every year, but we'd love to bring back the parade. People love a good parade downtown, and we would love to do that. Just not going to be probably every year based on how expensive it is. But
okay.
Yep.
And your parade display has grand marshal on a horse, waving to
does.
people with a band behind him in full band regalia with the tall hat. And,
Yep. And this is Johnny Miller. He's sitting atop trig. So Johnny actually rode, I want to make sure I get this right. Johnny was in 65 of the 95 parades that the American Royal hosted.
That's a lot of parades.
We did host a lot of parades, and Johnny was a big part of a lot of them. And so we wanted to honor Johnny's history in that way, and did the mock-up of him, somebody who was really a strong champion for the American Royal in that way. The other front case that we have here as you first walk in is the American Royal Horse Showcase. So today we have 6 different horse shows that we host throughout the year. They range in everything from what you see the arena being set up for today is a 100-jumper show.
Okay.
So Olympic level 100 jumpers.
And 100 jumper is the horses jumping over the different barricades.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
Yes.
We host a lot of Western disciplines. So if anybody's familiar with Yellowstone, you know cutting and reining in the ranch horses that do that. So we host one of those. Then we also host a couple different breed shows. So quarter horses, Arabian horses, and saddlebred horses all have a show here. Saddlebreds,
Wow.
actually, those are the ones that we host a national championship for that we're on a waiting list for stalls for. But yeah, so 6 different shows. We've got a lot of fun images in this. We actually have a really cool individual in Kansas City, the Sutherland family, Big in Rail, Big in Lumber, who R.Q. Sutherland was actually a really big fan of the quarter horse breed. And we have a lot of his ranch imagery and a lot of his former chaps, belt buckle, hat, a saddle from him, that just a really well-known individual. But if you do any research about the Sutherland family, they're a pretty darn prominent and wealthy family here in Kansas City.
And there's a pair of boots that do not have a horse image on them that looks like some sort of a eagle. Is that what that is?
And it should say RQS. So
Okay.
Yep, and that's for Robert Q. Sutherland. So,
Okay.
Yep.
And they've got a big eagle on the front coming down the sides is the wing, and the body of the eagle's in the front of the boots. Those are interesting.
Yeah.
And this dress is, and I guess pants and vest is pretty interesting too. It's a lot of beadwork, very ornate.
Yeah, so that's the Rollins family. So also really great supporters of the American Royal. The Rollins family also rode in the parade a number of years, and they had these outfits actually designed, the beautiful kind of turquoise, teal, beaded up. But the Rollins family, these are the same. They had a designer out in California who designed for Roy Rogers, other old Western movies. He designed that for them, so they had it to wear in the parade. And so if you notice, there's a lot of hats, cowboy hats, Western style hats that are here with a lot of pins, right?
Oh, yeah.
I talked about it earlier, but the pins really are a legacy here that's really significant. And then you've got the ring steward's jacket that's bright red. Before each class, they blow a trumpet to welcome in each class. And so the ring stewards are a really unique tradition we have here for the Saddlebred show and our national championship show.
And that had to have come over from England also, because it's a very English-looking jacket with the high boots and the...
Yep, so we do both Western and English saddle disciplines here.
Okay.
So, so you'll see both Western style saddles, English style saddles. Was one of the things that we don't have, so when this building was built in 1992, barbecue wasn't as big of a deal for us still. And so we don't have a barbecue case per se, but we still do have a barbecue, should show you, it's the Barbecue Hall of Fame. It actually lives with the American Royal.
Okay.
And it needs to be updated, to be honest, because we have a lot of Hall of Fame members. If you go on our website, you can actually see who they all are. But people like Guy Fieri, people like Henry Ford. So Henry Ford did more than just invent automation and vehicles. He actually is the inventor of the charcoal briquette.
No.
Yep. And so so the legends of barbecue, the Hall of Fame lives with us, which is a lot of fun. We have a Barbecue Hall of Fame committee who selects 3 new members every year and brings them to, they have their induction ceremony here in Kansas City. And so Kansas City really still is the home of barbecue. Kansas City style barbecue is really, I think, the best melting pot of barbecue styles regionally that a lot of people don't know. And I think we have some of our own distinct style, but But yeah, and so what you're seeing in front of you right now is a bunch of different photo cutouts we had of really prominent folks throughout our time in our time really talking about the different parts of what we do here at the American Royal.
Yeah, in this display, you've got a barbecue contestant, you've got a sheep fitter. No, what's a sheep fitter?
Yeah, so
That's not a shearer.
So
that's not a rancher.
Yeah, so in the livestock world, there is a whole community of folks who it is sometimes a weekend hobby, sometimes it's a full-time gig for them to go around and help people fit their livestock. So we are
for shows.
For shows, yep.
Okay, that makes okay.
So our show looks a little different than the folks in Texas. So there's a lot of major livestock shows in Texas who they're not allowed to fit their livestock. So we have people who I would trust them with my hair any day of the week. They are pretty darn phenomenal at dressing up a cow. And the goal is to hide the imperfections, right? To accentuate the parts that are really good, to hide the imperfections. And it's a whole art to do that.
It's basically the FFA kids that, I mean, they do the same thing for the county fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as grooming their animals up.
For the 4-H and FFA kids.
Okay.
So it's just done at the highest level here.
Just hadn't heard it called a sheep or a fitter.
Yep.
Okay, you've got a rodeo clown in here, somebody in the hunter jumper garb, a horse trainer, and a Hereford Association representative holding a great big trophy that he must have either presented or is in the process of winning.
Yep, so we are one of the top national shows for Herefords. Makes sense, right? But we're one of the largest ones for them, and so their national champion bull and heifer. We have a really special presentation for them here.
And then we come over to the next area, and you've got a lady holding Babe the pig as a hog producer, a building superintendent. Now he's got an important job here. It sounds like he's running all the time.
Yep.
A bull rider, a livestock auctioneer, quarter horse competitor, horse breeder, and a volunteer FFA student ambassador and 4-H participant. So do you guys do a lot with the FFA and the 4-H?
Yeah, so one of the unique challenges of Kansas City is that we are not large enough to host the National FFA Convention anymore. So FFA actually started here in Kansas City. They signed the charter here at what was the old Baltimore Hotel. It is now the Kansas City Public Library. There's a plaque down there that you can go see, and it's got to show off the history of Kansas City being the home of National FFA. So National FFA is actually the largest student-run organization in the United States today. Their convention will welcome a little over 60,000 people to Indianapolis now every year.
Wow.
So it's the third largest convention, not even student convention. It's the third largest convention after the RNC and the DNC.
Really?
And so it is a true production to make it happen. And so Kansas City actually doesn't. So things that are interesting, Indianapolis has done a really good job of branding themselves as a convention city, and they have the infrastructure to actually host them. Kansas City, unfortunately, doesn't have the infrastructure to host them. Now, are we hoping for the centennial of 2028 of National FFA that we might be able to do something? Absolutely. What that looks like, hosting the convention, we'll see. But they would have to use what is, so today, they host their convention, the sessions of the convention, in the NFL stadium, in the Colts stadium.
Really?
Yeah. And then they have their business sessions, just the business sessions, in Bankers Life, the home of the Indiana Pacers. And so
this is amazing to me that it's the third largest convention. Agriculture is important, and Future Farmers of America fits into that quite well, but they're in every school and that type of thing. But I had no idea that they were that large of an organization.
Absolutely.
This gives so much more hope to why you're building the building, because
and it's growing.
They're looking at the future of agriculture.
And it's exciting. So I think that when we talk about what we do with FFA today, it is very much so based around competition and then our experience in hosting FFA members who live locally. And then if you're an FFA member who's competed here, we don't have anything that, like for livestock or horse shows or all of that it's not so much a sanctioned FFA event, but you have done that as a part of your FFA experience and being here. So for us, we are looking to find more ways to tie into FFA, tie into 4-H, but you, to show here, don't have to be a member of either. to actually show here. And so that's a unique opportunity, I think, for us to continue to widen our base. But when we move to a new facility, we're thinking about how do we host more competitions for FFA members to come here. We have a pretty close proximity to Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri. What's the quad state competition that happens in Kansas City to bring those folks? And if we open it to those four, Oklahoma will certainly come, Arkansas will certainly come. And so we're excited about, I think, where the future is. Today, our facility isn't quite set up to be able to host a large number like that. And 4-H is the other organization that we continue to try and find partnerships and opportunities to work with. We have really phenomenal extension professionals and extension agents on either side of the state line who do a really good job of helping grow youth in both of those states, who we as the American Royal get to benefit from because of them bringing their livestock here and all of that. But we are really hopeful for the future of extension in both of those states, Kansas and Missouri, when we talk about moving to a new facility, it's funny, people might bring up some of the causes for concern, and all of us, I think, are seeing, there might be some of that exists, but there's way too much positive that outweighs any of that.
I like your optimism.
Yeah.
Agriculture is something that has to keep going if we are going to keep going.
Absolutely. So
we all have to eat.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Whether it's animal or or farming, plant, we all still have to eat.
Yep. So I'll walk you back. So we have like a timeline that kind of goes through the history of Kansas City here, and a lot of different kind of cases that all talk about some history of our city. But you talk about, why does Kansas City exist? Why are we such a prominent city? And really, we think about cattle trails. That's how we got started, right? And the city, cattle trails coming up from Texas. We were a part of a rail network that got cattle to Chicago, but also stopped here in Kansas City and were sold here. And so I think it's important to remember that Kansas City is a cow town. We're an original cow town. And it is exciting to me that our kind of new city administration isn't necessarily afraid of talking about that. They want to be known for more than that, and I appreciate that. The animal health corridor, as it's kind of Kansas City's legacy today, Columbia, Missouri to Manhattan, Kansas, Mizzou to Kansas State, and then north-south along I-35 and I-29 by about 2-3 hours. This is where the majority of, it's like 65% of the United States pet food supply comes from this area.
Really?
This is where you've got almost every major animal health company in the United States has either a vaccine site, has a corporate office, has a headquarters here in this area. It's pretty darn impressive, the legacy that cattle drives left in Kansas City to really have the prominence that it has today in animal health. This is probably my favorite photo. I was describing the stockyards.
Right.
This is as of 1900. So I talked about 1899, us having livestock shows, cattle shows specifically. This fine stock barn is what those cattle shows were happening in. But the rest of this is all stock yards, and the red is all meat packing. And so
you've got a large area there. It's what, 5 miles?
Yeah,
long?
At least, right? So I think the unique thing, you drove down this street today.
Okay.
Right in front of the Livestock Exchange building.
Right.
What a lot of people don't know is where we sit today, the border doesn't follow the river. You can walk from our facility today to Kansas.
Okay.
The Exchange building, the way it was built, the Livestock Exchange building was intentional so it could be on both sides of the state line. And there was a line of green tile that separated. And so based on state tax laws, the state legislature is making policy changes between both states. You had people who would pick up phones and move them to different parts of the building, depending on the time of year, depending on what state legislatures had done. And so we talk about Kansas City has this really fun, fraught history of companies jumping borders based on who has the better tax kind of piece to them.
Okay.
And that's been going on since the 1800s. That we are a unique city in the fact that no one else has to fight a state line quite like we do.
And the river isn't your state line then?
Nope.
How interesting is that?
Right.
Because usually they divide states right down the middle of the river or one bank or the other. And so you can have your stockyards with two different states. That is really interesting that it was set up that way.
Yep. But all the major packers were here. Swift, Cudahy, Armour, they were all here.
And it gives you good access to the river for moving product up and down the river. And you've also got the rails coming in.
Yep. Kansas City's got
It's just so well located.
Yeah, got a great history and great history with that. So we start to talk, as it moves through the timeline, it starts to talk about the foundation years of the American Royal. Our first buildings, we're showing in a livestock tent for a good part of our history. We've got the champion herd from 1899 right here. As you see, headed by the famous Dale.
Okay.
Right, so I talked about Dale earlier. He truly is one of the most exciting Herefords of the time. I talked about Tom Bass earlier. So this is Tom Bass. Like I said, born a slave, died a free man, and a prominent horse trainer. He invented the Bass bit. This Bass bit's still used to this day. Pretty darn exciting.
I was going to say, it just looks like a normal horse bit that you see on every bridle.
And he invented it.
Wow. Is this his saddle?
It is one of the saddles. So we have a lot. So one thing that I'm fairly new into my role that we have done a really good job is we've done a really good job of collecting a lot of stuff. We've not done a phenomenal job of putting labels on a lot of stuff.
Okay.
And so there are definitely things in here that I know are probably maybe even more important than I know. And whenever we move, I'm excited for the opportunity to kind of catalog it. So we've got as we move through 1922, we built a new home. 1925, it burns down. And
really?
And was rebuilt in time for 1926's livestock show and horse shows. But this is kind of the imagery that a lot of people remember from the American Royal and kind of what it used to look like in terms of that big fanfare experience. And we still have a big fanfare experience today. It doesn't look quite the same. We've got kind of just more imageries, more memories. It continued to grow. This is from the 1926 livestock show. This is kind of the predecessor of what FFA was. So this is the first National Congress of Vocational Agricultural Students. So students from each state having an opportunity to come together. This is before they signed an official charter for 1928 for the National FFA, but this is the first Congress of those students together.
And this is a picture that's got 200 people in it, it looks like, and you've got Nebraska. They're holding plaques with the state, and you've got Iowa, Ohio, Oklahoma, Michigan, Idaho, New Mexico, all of the different groups of people standing behind their signs. It's a pretty cool picture. Yep.
The other main character that I think we haven't talked about yet for the American Royal is Lula Longcomb. So Lula is an individual we call the Queen of the American Royal. So Lula and the Long family have a great history in Kansas City. Really prominent, wealthy family. It's Kansas City's version of the Vanderbilts. It's Kansas City's version of the really prominent family. So her former city home, Corinthian Manor, that she was born and raised in, is now the home to the Kansas City Museum.
Okay.
Her country estate, which was Longview Farms, Longview Stables, Longview Acres, is now part of the Lee Summit City Longview Stables, where all of her horses were boarded, her championship horses, is now an elementary school. They've done a really phenomenal job of taking their country home and actually the estate home and actually turning it into a beautiful event venue that people can rent out. And the Lee Summit's, I think, done a phenomenal job of taking their acreage and making it very accessible to the public. So there's a really large lake that sat on that property. So the Long family, really prominent family. Lula specifically was a really prominent horsewoman, I should probably say. So at a time when very few women were competing in those disciplines, she struck out on her own and said, no, I will be competing. Competed here for 50 years, multiple national champions. She always named her horses with the last three letters ION, if you had to guess why.
I have no idea. You can tell me why.
Yeah. So the word champion.
Champion, okay.
With I-O-N.
Okay.
And so all of her horses were named last three letters I-O-N.
And she competed always on a side saddle because that's the way women were supposed to compete, right?
So interestingly enough, she actually was a big fan of the carriage events.
Okay.
And so this is actually one of her carriages right here. She was iconically always having her French bulldogs with her in the show ring. And so you've got a photo of one there. You've got a great photo of her in her latter years on one of her carriages with her French bulldog. But she actually had a march written for her.
Really?
Written for the American Royal, dedicated to Lula. There's some great photos of her and her family and showing some of their prize horses.
And you've got one of her driving carriages here.
Absolutely. Yep.
Wow.
So the other unique
So
thing,
she didn't do it all on side saddle.
Nope.
I better put that disclaimer
And
in
I
there.
think, yeah, and I think if she ever heard you say that, she might get a bit upset.
That's just what women were expected to do at the time, and I don't know how they wrote them anyway.
Yeah, she was bucking tradition early on. As you go through this timeline, you'll see we have some stuff about World War II. This building, we've only had 3 years that we didn't have a livestock show here at the American Royal. One was 1914. There was a big hoof and mouth outbreak. I probably got the disease name wrong.
The hoof and mouth
thank you.
cow disease,
Yeah,
yes.
so that was a really big outbreak, and so we didn't have any livestock show. We didn't have horse shows. In 1945 and 46, this building was actually used to build World War II gliders, and we didn't have any livestock shows, horse shows, anything going on here at the American Royal during that time either. Those are the only 3 times. So 2020, we actually had a livestock show here when the rest of the world kind of stopped and slowed down. We kept going. So that's, I think, one of the exciting things is our organization has endured a lot. Depressions, recessions, world wars, and have made it through on the other side.
That is cool.
But you've got a few more fun things in here. You're looking at a pretty beautiful white evening gown. You might be wondering what that is.
Along with some crowns and a scepter on the other side.
So the American Royal Queen Contest existed for a really long time. It's not a tradition we have anymore, but it ended in the 80s. But in 1949, a group of businessmen came together and said, hey, we really want our daughters to stay engaged in the American Royal, stay involved in agriculture. How do we do that? And so they created kind of the Queen's Court. They were called the Bells of the American Royal. Very quickly, those women didn't want to be the court of the Queen. They wanted to be their own organization. And so the Bells of the American Royal is actually a civic organization that bring prominent and really incredibly dedicated families in Kansas City to the civic passions of our city together. Now, their main event that they host every year is their ball and gala, the Botar Ball. So Bells of the American Royal, Botar.
Okay.
Botar Ball. So Botar supports the American Royal annually, financially, and with their volunteer time. And so their gala is their main fundraiser to help support us. But this is the prominent families in Kansas City who want their daughters to stay involved in agriculture, stay involved in food. Kansas City's got a really unique legacy in that way, that all of the prominent families who, doesn't matter what private school you went to here in Kansas City or public school you went to in Kansas City, they wanted them to stay involved in agriculture, and that's how the organization got started. So every year there's a new gown designed. All of those are still stored here in Kansas City. They perform a 12-minute waltz with an ostrich feather fan.
Oh, wow.
They have an escort or a gotar, gentleman of the American Royal, who escorts them throughout their entire experience. But it is months of training to perform at the ball in October, and then they're forever considered a Botar after that. And so they have their own kind of civic organization. It's about 1,100 living members today, and they're spread throughout the United States, right? But the vast majority of them stayed here in Kansas City and are incredible volunteers, incredible civic supporters of us, and we're really proud to have that connection with Botar.
That's cool. That's neat that they set up an organization like that.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, right? That's
I don't know what else to really say.
So, and this is just kind of through the years. It talks about kind of who we are today. and then where we're headed in the future. The rest of the museum is really designed for children's experiences and getting them kind of exposed to agriculture at a really fundamental level. And so to me, there's exciting stuff you probably know and probably not all that interesting, but yeah.
Well, but kids area is an important part of a museum. I really like the kids to be able to come and experience a museum, have fun, to where they want to come back and learn. And as they get older, they may leave the kids part and find
more for them
so
to
much
do.
more interest in what the other history parts are.
Absolutely. So I've talked a lot. What questions do you have for me, things about the museum that we haven't talked about that you wanted to know more about?
You know, I think we've probably covered most of it, unless there's some other areas that you're interested in. I just basically wanted to take a tour, talk about what the future is, and learn about the American Royal.
No, I appreciate that. So I think just for your audience, I think one thing to kind of have them keep in mind is our museum today is really only open during large events when we feel like we can appropriately staff it with volunteers.
I will tell you that I was highly disappointed when we showed up here. The website actually says that you guys are open 9 to 3 or something 5 days a week.
I'm sure.
And we got here and it was closed, and we're going, okay, so what do we do now? And we started walking through the facility, and we were just stunned by, this is actually a very beautiful building, very, I don't know if I want to say ornate, but it is kind of ornate, and it's in a kind of a Western way.
Absolutely.
Or livestock type way. And then we saw the alpaca show, so we had to go do that. And then we found the office, which is where we found out what the hours were and where you were. And we're able to make a connection here. And like I said in the beginning, you were a little bit hesitant because you guys are in an expansion mode and things aren't working quite the way you would like to have them work.
Correct. Yep.
But if somebody shows up here and is interested in seeing this, could they call and make arrangements to have it open?
They certainly could. Yep. We'd be more than happy to do that. It all depends on what kind of our schedule of events and if we've got volunteers available or if I'm available to do it. And then 2026 is when we hope to have our facility fully open in Kansas. So if people are willing to wait a few years, I can promise it's going to be probably a lot more exciting. We'll have a lot more interesting displays, ways that we can better portray our history than kind of the static environment that you're walking in today. And I'm really excited about the opportunity we have to really bring our stockyards history, bring our American Royal history, and put it on in a better show, because this is history that is worth remembering. It's history that is well worth the investment to be displayed properly. And I'm excited for what our facility has the ability to do in displaying that history.
Well, and with this museum, the history is what's making your future.
Yep.
I mean, all museums, they record a history, which history repeats itself. Learning that history is important. But this one, the progression is still progressing in such a way that your past is your future.
Yeah, and I think we had a lot of people provide a lot of hesitancy and give us a lot of pause, and then in 2017 when we announced the move to Kansas, and forced us to really reflect of, is this the right move? COVID provided another opportunity for us to pause, reflect, is this really the right move? And I think we're more convinced than ever that a new facility, a new stage to really put the best of the best in food and agriculture on for the public is where we need to go and what we need to do.
Now, are the laws more favorable to you in Kansas?
So it turns out,
like, are you going to move back in 2030 because the laws change?
I think we're investing way too much out there. That likely won't happen. It's funny you mentioned laws. My next meeting after this is actually to discuss liquor laws and what we are and are not allowed to do for hosting some events here at our facility, and what does our liquor license say, and
now, are you moving across the river?
We are. So
you're going to be across the river
across
in Kansas.
the river in Kansas it's next to the Kansas Speedway, the Sporting KC Park, which is the MLS team in Kansas City, the Legends Shopping Center. And that area is starting to blow up quite a bit. And we are really good friends with a lot of our landowner neighbors around us who have said, okay, when you move and this other areas around here are all growing. They're all excited. This is an exciting area of Kansas City to be in. We're going to make some investment as well. So we're expecting people around us to be putting up new hotels, new restaurants. There's some new private living facilities that'll go up as well. We're really excited. We think there's a lot of great opportunity that the Kansas City agribusiness community is going to be pumped about. Some people who, there's a lot of associations for livestock and for horses here in Kansas City. People who, when we announced the move, said we want to move with you. And we'll be very excited when we get out there, the new office suites that'll be available that aren't necessarily on our property, but will be created with their organizations in mind. Organizations also that are the ag tech community, specifically as it relates to animal health, hasn't had a kind of a core center. Plant health has done a really good job of kind of gravitating towards the Raleigh-Durham area and North Carolina and St. Louis. But animal health and animal ag tech hasn't really had kind of a center to go to. And we think Kansas City has the opportunity to be that as well. So our move, we aren't in the business of animal ag tech, but our move will help kind of create this locus and this center for some of that movement of offices, of buildings, of organizations being on the Kansas side and being centered in Kansas City.
Okay. So can I get on your schedule to do this podcast again
Please
in
do.
2026?
Let's do it. That sounds great.
When you're open and everything's running full bore?
I'll have a lot of new exciting things to show you at that time, which is awesome. I had a meeting last week with the partner that we're hoping to work with to create kind of all of these experiences. And some of the things that they've been able to do for other museums, other folks, it's truly breathtaking. So if my personal wish, if I don't have a VR goggle and a saddle for you to sit on so you can experience what it feels like to ride, I'll be very disappointed. That's an easy, and that is an easy, when I brought up that idea, they're like, oh, that's an easy win. That's not hard. So the stuff they're going to be able to create with us to be much more experiential is really exciting.
It is. I'm excited to come back in 2026.
Yeah, hopefully you come back to Kansas City more than that. And hopefully you can come back and see our rodeo, see our livestock show, come back whenever you get a chance to.
You know, we love Kansas City. We've been here 6 days, and I was not excited about coming here. I don't like big cities. I mean, we jump in, we jump back out. But we've been up to St. Joseph. We spent time in Independence. We've been down here in Kansas City. It is easy to get around. For being as old of a city as it is, we have not experienced traffic jams really or anything else. It's been nice that way. So much history here, so many things to do, and it's just we have been going, and we have the need to come back because I think we could stay here another 3 weeks just going to different places, different venues, museums, historical sites, and not be bored. Yeah, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, our city's having a really fun renaissance where I think we're finally starting. I think we finally have a lot of folks who understand and appreciate what we have here and are doing a good job of telling the story to others to get them excited about coming here.
And it is. It's a cool place. I would highly recommend anybody, if you're looking for a weekend getaway, Kansas City is cool. So thank you, Nathan. I appreciate your time so much for you coming in and opening up a museum that's normally closed but is open if you make arrangements in transition and all of that type of thing. I do appreciate your time, and I always close my podcasts out by saying the world is full of wonder. And in this case, I would say it's full of optimism. People need to get out and explore and have an absolutely wonder-filled day.
Haul the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?